board to life. Today we're going to be going through all the items in Nemesis Retaliation along with a quick overview of the tactical belt tokens. Let's jump right into it. Okay, so starting off with the tactical belt tokens. The way these work is you get 4 of them at the start of the game. You can pick them in any combination, but you can also acquire them, as we'll show, from item cards later or certain actions that we've shown in the previous video, such as the combat engineer being able to use a card to essentially find grenades in utility rooms. Anyway, the way these work is you have your character board and you slot them into these little slots on the side. And that's just how they generally can be held. There's also some item cards that are able to hold a specific type or a generic type of one. Now, our first type of tactical belt token is the ammo token. This is actually a two-sided token, one side being full, one side being empty. So this can just slot into your tactical belt like normal. However, if you have an item card that is a weapon that uses ammo, you actually slot these onto the card, and that displays the current ammo of the weapon. Now, I will also show, because this is the one item I seem to have missed in my last video, this is actually the heavy gun operator's starting item, and it's a 2 magazine weapon that treats ones as 2s on burst rolls, and when rolling the hazard symbol on a burst die, will break itself, so then you'll have to fix it. Thought I'd sneak that in here. Our next item is the grenade, and the grenade is essentially a tactical belt item that will allow you to basically burst into a corridor, except that you actually add 2 to the result. Now, if you're adding 2 to the result of a burst die, being that the minimum value to roll is a 1, which normally is really bad, because only one enemy in the corridor will die, a 1 is actually like a 3. So that means you can roll between 3 and 6 enemies dead, which could completely wipe a corridor potentially, no matter how full it is, which would normally not be possible. And then next we have the oxygen token. Now, the oxygen token, pretty simple. It says +3 to remind you. So essentially, if you're down and you're low on oxygen, you can use one of these, and then you add 3 to your current oxygen. Just keeps you alive longer. And for the last of our tactical belt tokens, we have the med pack. So, this little med pack is pretty simple. You discard it, and it says +2 to remind you. All you do, you take your little health marker, and you move it up 2. Pretty simple. Keeps you from dying as easily. As a quick reminder, when using tactical belt tokens, it will only cost you 1 action no matter how many tokens you're using. So if you are both down in oxygen and health, it makes a lot more sense to increase them both by spending both tokens, since it still only costs you that 1 action. Now, moving on to our actual item cards, we will be starting with the military or red items. So in the red deck, there are several different types of items, and a lot of them are duplicates of each other. However, there are a few unique ones. So let's actually begin with the grenade item. So grenades are one of the tactical belt tokens as well, and when gaining this grenade item, you can actually so when you gain one of these, you can actually use it for free immediately instead of putting it in your backpack and then eventually using an action to use it. And when using it, you can either gain a token to basically place it in your tactical belt slot to save it for later. Rather than having to go and use 1 action for it, you can use 1 action to do it as well as anything else. Or you can essentially just resolve the grenade effect right away, because that's what that says, and it's basically just resolving that token as though you played the token and not the card. There are 5 of these in the deck. So that's a pretty likely outcome of drawing a military item. Next up, we have ammo, which is essentially the same concept. So when gaining this card, you can use it for free right away if you want. Let's get the camera focus here. And then all it does is it gives you one of these, which you could then put anywhere on your tactical belt or on a weapon. In the deck, there are 6 of these cards. So also a very likely outcome. So searching for red items is in fact a good way of getting ammo. Now, our next card is the military taser, which is a heavy item, so it does have to go in one of your hand slots, but it allows you to repel an intruder from the room, which I believe we've gone over in the last video how that works, or a character of your choice will have to discard all of their action cards. So if you're in a situation where you really don't want a player to do something, whether that's because you're trying to like betray them or they're trying to betray you, you can just end their turn like prematurely, which is pretty nice. But don't do that if you don't have a really good reason to, because then people don't like you. Uh-oh. And of the cards here, we have 6 copies of the military taser, so quite common. Actually, equally as common as ammunition, which is quite odd. Anyway, we will now move on to the next one, which is the remote detonator. This is also a heavy item, so you do need a hand slot. But what it allows you to do is discard a secure token from any room in the same section to deal critical damage to all intruders in the room, but then each player there will lose 3 health, which is also quite a bit of damage. So essentially what this is letting you do is if you've previously used the secure action in any room in the same section as you, doesn't have to be your room, shouldn't be your room actually, and that token is still there, you can essentially remove it to blow this up like you had set up an explosive, and that was your securing. So that's pretty nice, and there's actually 3 copies of this in the deck. So not as common as the other 2 items we've gone through, but still quite common. Now, next, we actually have the flashbang, which you just put in your backpack, and it essentially lets you move and then not get attacked. So if you are either leaving a room that has an enemy in it, or going through a corridor with enemies in it, rather than having to get attacked by them in order to move through, you can just use this card as you do it, because essentially you're using an action card to use this card, but this card is letting you move. So it's essentially a free card, and then you don't get hit. And there are 3 copies of the flashbang. So it's equally common to the remote detonator. And then we have the next card, which is the portable barrier. Now what this lets you do is you can close an accessible door. Now, it can actually just do this in a corridor that doesn't have a door slot. And I think I'll pull up a demonstration of this. Or if the door has been destroyed. And there are 2 copies of this card. But I'll pull up a demonstration. Okay, so here we have the armory with the heavy gun operator. And I have a door token. Now this is actually a custom printed one. This is not the one from the terrain pack. Just want to make that clear before here. But basically, if I were to play the portable barrier right now, I could place this door here, for example, or here. But that would be normal for being able to close a door because these are the door symbols on tiles. This actually got me really confused when I first started playing this game, because in previous Nemesis games, there used to just be like a door can go in the middle of this corridor, whereas with Retaliation, doors can only go on the sides of corridors. So you can actually have 2 closed doors in one corridor, potentially. And you can only normally close a door if it has this like white symbol here on the edges. Now, in the case of the portable barrier, though you can do that, you can also place it somewhere that doesn't have a door, like over here. And then to add to that, if a door was destroyed at some point, like that, you can still place it, because essentially you're putting up a barrier yourself, you're not closing the door. And then for our final item from the red deck that actually has duplicates, we have the exploring drone. This one's a little weird. So essentially you're resolving the exploration sequence in a neighboring room, but you don't move there. So basically you go through that whole sequence of moving into the like empty space, drawing a room tile, drawing an exploration tile, or exploration card, and then placing corridors and all those things. But then you don't resolve the entrance effect. And the entrance effect is the end where it's like reminding you to make a noise roll or resolving a room encounter or any of that kind of stuff. So this has 2 little benefits. One would be if you just need a room discovered and you don't actually want to deal with whatever could happen from going over there. And the other is that because you're not going over there, you don't have to backtrack if you don't want to go that way. So it just gives you that little bit of insurance essentially. And there are 2 copies of this in the red deck. Now, We have two more items, and they're unique items, so there's only one of each in the deck. So the first is the anti-aircraft codes. So you can only use these in a computer room, and that computer room cannot be broken. However, it allows you to look at both the anti-aircraft tokens and place them back in any order, which is a great thing to have. I wouldn't specifically say you should go looking through red items just to find this card, but if you do find it, you should take it in most cases, because the anti-aircraft tokens are essentially a 50-50 chance of you just losing the game at the end if you leave that way. So a great thing to help your whole team, assuming you're trying to help your team, and just generally increase your odds of survivability if you haven't already figured out which way it is as to if your lander is going to be shot down before it actually picks you up, because that's not good. And then our final red item is the personal log codes. Now, the personal log codes are similar to the anti-aircraft codes in the way that you have to be in a computer room that is not broken, and they are also only one use, just like the anti-aircraft codes. Now, it allows you to check all the objective cards of one player of your choice, which I would say in some cases isn't all that useful, but it does let you confirm that someone's goal is not to kill you, because if you check someone that you think is going to be trying to kill you this whole time, not that they can directly attack you, but as we know from those like remote detonators, they could just be blowing up the room. It's not directly attacking you. So it's nice to be able to check that so you know if you should stay away from someone. So on to the yellow or utility items next. So first we have the tools. Now this is just a generic like toolkit, I believe. It's just kind of weird to just have tools because it's unclear as to what kind of tools they are specifically. So I'm just going to assume general. So it's a one-use item that allows you to discard a malfunction marker, essentially fixing either an item that you have or a room that you're in. So cheaper than the repair action because it's only one card to use. Or you can open or close an accessible door, accessible being one that's connected to the room you're in directly. There are 6 copies of this card in the deck, so quite a common find. For our next utility item, we have the phosphates. Now, this allows you to reinforce one empty adjacent corridor or discard a fire. Discarding the fire is pretty simple. I will pull up an example of the reinforcing a corridor just to remind you in a second here, but there are 5 of this card in the deck, so also rather common. Okay, so back to our example. We have the heavy gun operator in the armory again, and let's say they play the phosphates card. Because there are no enemies in this corridor here, it can be reinforced. So I take this tile and I flip it over, and it becomes a 0, meaning that noise is never going to be rolled in that corridor. Enemies can still end up in it, but they will not start in it. For our next utility item, we have the oxygen tank, which is similar to the ammo and grenade ones, where you can use it for free once you gain it, and it basically can either do the tactical belt effect on its own, or give you the tactical belt token. So that would just be gain 3 oxygen. Now, there are actually 8 of this card in the deck, so this is actually more common than any of the other types of refillable tactical belt tokens so far. So we will see if that's the same with the other decks. Now, our next our next utility item is actually the fire extinguisher, which is a heavy item, so you do have to put it in your hand slot. But you can either discard a fire with it, or you can repel an intruder from the room. Essentially, you're just spraying chemicals at them, which is interesting, but it's a fun idea. And there are 5 of this card in the deck. Now, our next card is one that you are probably familiar with if you've ever played a previous Nemesis game. So this utility item is the duct tape, and it essentially functions mostly the same, but it actually has an additional use now. So first of all, you can use it to repair stuff or discard a malfunction marker. But the use it's more well known for is placing a heavy item above another heavy item in your hand slot, is how they word it, which, as they also have underneath, you can essentially carry 2 heavy items in one hand. So if I wanted to, for example, this is probably not something you'd be doing, but let's say I wanted to carry 2 fire extinguishers in one hand because I have a weapon in the other. I don't know why you'd be doing this, but it works. So you basically take these two cards, and rather than just setting them in separate hand slots, you just stack them on top of each other like this, and then you put them in the hand slot, effectively creating a third hand. So what have we learned today? Duct tape gives you 3 hands. Now, the utility item deck has one unique item as well, and that is the heavy item called the robot controller. Now, this allows you to activate the robot anywhere in the facility, or you can discard it to essentially refill the tactical gear on the robot. Now, the reason this is really useful is because normally, if you're in the room or the adjacent room to the robot, you can activate it for 1 action card, or if you're in a computer room that's anywhere in the facility and is not broken, you can activate the robot from there for 2 action cards. So this allows you to be any room, doesn't have to have a computer or anything in the facility, and you can just activate the robot for 1 action card, as long as you're not in combat. Plus, if you really need to, you can discard it to get the additional items from the robot. So that's the utility deck. And now we move on to the green or medical deck. This is my favorite of these searchable item decks, not just because it has the most variety, but also because it has a lot of healing items, which is really useful, because it's very easy to die really quickly, and I'd rather not die, as I would hope most people would. So our first one will be the stimulants, which is a one-use item that can either restore 2 health or let you draw 2 action cards. So that's just a pretty nice thing. There's 3 copies of it. And then next we have the caffeine pills, which is just a better version of one of those effects. It's a one-use item, draw 3 action cards. There are 3 of this card here. And then we have something that can be quite useful if you use it right, which is the heavy oxygen tank. So it does take a hand slot, but it gains 7 oxygen. Now, the oxygen track only goes up to 7, so you only really want to use this when you're low on oxygen, like at 0 or 1. So definitely wait until you're at the bottom to make it worth using. But there are 3 of this card in the deck. And then we have the med pack, which is a tactical belt item essentially, because it's a free use when you gain it if you want to, which can either give you the tactical belt token or just heal the 2 that token would do anyway. So either use it right away or save it for later. And there are 4 copies. And then we have another heavy item, the med kit, which can allow you to either discard a serious wound or restore 3 health. Now, 3 health is the equivalent of damage of a serious wound, but you can't heal a serious wound otherwise, because you can only heal up to below that, being that your health track can't go over the serious wound, if that makes sense. And there are 4 of this as well. Then we have the medical stapler, which can either discard a serious wound, allowing you to continue healing later, as well as not having that downside from the serious wound, or you can restore 2 health. And there are 5 of this card. We then have the adrenaline injection, which is another one-use item, and it lets you draw 1 action card, but then perform any number of actions during that turn and then pass as the last one. So that's really useful for 2 reasons. One is if you really need to do a bunch of stuff before anyone else gets a turn, and the other is because that would actually reduce your oxygen use, since you lose oxygen every turn, and a turn is normally 2 action cards. So if this is your first action card, you discard 1, which then by drawing 1, you're essentially put back to your full amount of actions, and then you can perform any number of them. So essentially you can take your turn all at once and therefore only lose 1 oxygen your entire turn, rather than 2 or 3. And there are 3 copies of this. Now our last type of item before the unique ones is the antiseptic. So this allows you to remove a contamination from your hand without scanning it. Really useful if you're thinking it's possible you could be infected, because you literally just take that card out of your hand and you just remove it completely. You don't have to worry about discarding it and not being able to use it for actions in the future. You don't have to worry about it being infected and then having to deal with the larva on your board. You're just all set with this. There's 3 of them. Now, for our 2 unique items, we have first the termination codes, which is another codes card, so it can only be used in a room with a computer and that is not broken and outside of combat. Now, what this lets you do is you can basically pick any room in the facility and surround it with doors. Now, it also specifies that the door does not have to actually exist. Once again, there doesn't have to be a door slot there, and the door could be already destroyed. It's just like a lockdown protocol on that specific room. So if someone's in the room with the queen and you want them dead, termination codes on that room, they're stuck in there. Or basically stuck in there because it's quite hard to get out of a room with an enemy when there's doors around it. And our last item card of all the searchable item decks is the emergency life support codes, which is another codes, so only in a computer room that's not broken, and it lets you flip one of the life support systems, whether that you're turning it on or turning it off in any section without having to be there, and only for 1 card. Quite useful. And now we will move on to the best item deck, although I will say, in some ways they are the hardest to get. I'm talking about the support equipment, of course, because all players, with the exception of the contractor, do actually get 1 support item card at the start of the game, from a choice of 7 that are drafted. However, it's really hard to get them after that, as there's not many cards that can. However, it's not impossible. So these are all unique items, and I'm going to go through them all, because most of them are quite good, and you never want to turn one of these down. And it's always quite difficult to pick which of the 7 you want at the start of the game, especially if you're not playing with a lot of people and you have a lot more choices then. So we're actually starting with one of my favorites. This is the portable device. Sounds really basic at first. It's a heavy item, and if you're in a computer room or a life support control room, you can use that room even if it's broken. Now, that doesn't sound all that good, especially since it's not like going to defend you or anything. However, there's the 3 life support rooms, which are one of the biggest things you want to do as you move around the facility, because you don't want to be constantly losing oxygen if you can help it. And there's also a lot of computer rooms. Now, the issue is that it's really common for when you walk into one of those life support rooms or a computer room that you really want to use, that room is broken. Now, if that room is broken, most characters would have to spend 2 action cards to repair it. And then the room action also costs 2 action cards, which means you're essentially using 4 actions just to turn on the life support in a section. What this does is if you walk into that room and it's broken, same conditions as before, you can use 1 action card to use this item. And by doing that, you can immediately activate that room's effect without having to pay the 2 action cards for activating it, or without repairing it, or both, which just saves a huge amount of actions, and this has helped me so many times. I almost always have someone pick this when it shows up. Next is a pretty simple one. This is the submachine gun. So what this does is it's a heavy range weapon. It has 1 ammo capacity, and when you roll the ammo symbol when shooting, it will still, of course, consume ammo. That's the purpose of the ammo symbol, but it also deals critical damage, which means this weapon has a double chance of instant killing enemies. However, you will still lose the ammo just as much. Next, we have the engineering equipment, which allows you to either discard a malfunction marker or a fire marker, or you can discard it to reinforce an empty adjacent corridor. So it's essentially a combination of a lot of those utility items. The only thing I have against this one is it's a 1-use item, and it's actually, no, it's not a 1-use item. Never mind, this is worth it. It is a heavy item, but being able to just do that, either of those things instantly, essentially, as a 1-card action is pretty nice, as long as you're not in combat, of course. Next, we have a fun weapon, which we're going to see a lot of in this deck, because there's a lot of unique weapons. This is the flamethrower. So this allows you to burst and shoot. And I should clarify, when I say that, I mean this effect applies to both. You don't do both at the same time. So whether you're bursting or shooting, if you're in a section without life support, you're going to spend 1 oxygen because the fire is going to consume some of your oxygen, being that there's no oxygen in the air to create that fire, and it has to feed off of something. And then on the hazard symbol or the out of ammo symbol, you do place a fire marker in your room. Now, the reason this is so good despite that is it doesn't use ammo. Like, this weapon does not require ammo. Meaning that the worst that happens, if you're in a section that does have like life support on, is you could potentially be lighting your room on fire, which might do 1 damage. And that's not going to always happen, especially if you're just shooting. So it's great to have a no ammo weapon because you will never run out. Next, we have the heavy armor, which is an armor item, so it will go into armor slots on your board. I described how that works in the last video. And essentially this has 1 green slot, so what you can do is you can actually take, and if this is on your character board, when you first get this item, it comes with a med kit, which slots into that spot. You can also, if you've used it, store a med kit there in the future as well. But the actual effect of the heavy armor is whenever I would gain a serious wound, you may lose 2 health instead, which a serious wound is essentially equal to 3 health, but it also gives you the negative effects, so that's worth it usually. However, since a serious wound doesn't always deal damage if you've already taken enough damage, sometimes it's still worthwhile to just take the serious wound. But I do want to describe something quick, because I don't think I gave this detail in the last video. So, as I said, armor does slot into these in the heavily injured section over here. Now, if I were to lose enough health that I get down to a point where this red cube that tracks my health goes on top of the armor spot, the armor breaks and it's lost. So there is kind of a durability system on the armor. Just a little warning if you're picking armor. Doesn't mean don't take it, it's still really useful. But you have to be careful. Next, we have the RPG launcher, which is a 1-use heavy item. So it does take a hand and you can only use it once and then it vanishes. But you pick a neighboring room and then all corridors adjacent to that room as well. And you destroy all the doors connected to that room, you deal critical damage to all the intruders, and all players take 3 damage. So this is a one-off, really powerful item, because it's not so much that you will get a crazy amount of use out of this, it's more that you can, because the maximum amount of intruders in a corridor is 6. So therefore there could be an enemy in a room, and there could be 6 enemies in every adjacent corridor, and this would kill all of them. You do, of course, have to be careful of other players, but there's definitely uses for this. You just have to make sure you use it at the best time. And that you use it. Because the worst part about it is if you are trying to figure out when you want to use it and you are too afraid to use it because you think you'll need it later, and then you never use it, you've just wasted this one item that you get, and you might as well pick something else. Now, next we have the bayonet. So this is a melee weapon, it's heavy, and you actually put this in the same slot as a ranged weapon. So you put it like on top, kind of similar to the duct tape, and then whenever you would be attacked by an enemy, you can place a malfunction marker on this to prevent the attack. So essentially you can like stab at it a little bit when it goes to attack you and block the attack, but then this breaks. So you'll have to fix it if you want to use it again. This is pretty good, so long as you have the capabilities to fix it. Our next item just provides a little passive bonus, but it does take up a hand slot. It's the perimeter security device. So whenever you discover a new room, you ignore the room encounter results. And the reason it says from all sources is because that could either be from rolling the noise die and having it land on that symbol, which there are 2 of actually, so it's a 1 in 5 chance that happens. And also, there's exploration cards that automatically just resolve that instead of having you rolling noise. So this is just a nice little defense from that, because honestly, the worst thing that can happen to you in this game is having an enemy in the room with you. Next, we have another unique weapon, the sonic gun. It's another no ammo weapon, but in this case, when doing a burst, you're treating a 3 and a 4 as a 2. So basically you're either rolling a 1 or a 2, and it's a 50-50 either way, because that's the odds on the die. So you'll basically be stuck between a 50% chance of rolling a 1 and a 50% chance of rolling a 2, which means despite the fact that you're not losing any ammo by doing it, you are dealing with the fact that you're not going to be able to wipe out more than 2 enemies at a time. And then if you roll the hazard symbol or the low ammo symbol, you do place a malfunction marker in your room, which in some cases is not an issue if you don't want to use that room. And on normal shoot rolls, other than that whole breaking the room potentially, there's no actual cost to shooting no matter what, so I'd say it's pretty worthwhile. Next, we have another unique weapon, the assault shotgun. So whenever you would be attacked by an intruder, you can spend all ammo from it, and if you do, you deal 1 hit to the intruder and prevent the attack. Honestly, I don't like this card. It's nice to be able to prevent that attack, but the fact that that's just dealing 1 hit, which means in most cases it can't kill them, unless it's a larva, because it's not actually going to be rolling the die, and rolling the die is what causes them to die, hence the die. And basically, because the hit sequence is when you're shooting, you basically deal a hit, roll the die. If the number on the die is equal to or less than that value, it dies, or of course the critical symbol, which means just dealing a hit is not going to kill anything, with the exception of if the queen is, because the queen actually has a health track separately. If that health track reaches a critical point from that, it can be worth it, but that's rarely going to happen. And preventing the attack is nice, but the fact that it only has 1 ammo slot in the first place, and it's consuming all of that anyway, it's not great. I guess maybe if you've already used a burst action, so you only have like 1 ammo in it. Actually, it doesn't specify you have to have ammo, but I'm going to assume that because it says spend, it means you do. Anyway, we'll move on to the next one, which is definitely going to change the way the game plays if you pick it. It's the supporting robot controller. So this, first of all, will allow you to activate the robot from anywhere in the facility for only 1 action card, similar to some other cards we've seen. However, you can instead, when using this, place the robot in your room, even if the hibernatorium is not discovered. And if you do, then you actually reveal the robot card. So basically, you can just bring the robot with you rather than finding it in the facility. Really different way to play the game, but it can be helpful. And then we have the grenade launcher, another special weapon and a very unique one. So when bursting, you can actually use any number of grenades from it before or instead of a normal burst. So there is 1 ammo on here, as well as 2 grenade slots. So it will come with those 2 grenades. But essentially, you can slot grenades into this grenade launcher, and then when you go to shoot, you can choose to either fire those grenades, which you're probably not going to do on your own. But what you can do is you can burst, and then you can also fire grenades as well, which means you can do some insane amount of bursting. So like if you're surrounded by 3 corridors with enemies in them, you could shoot into the one with the lowest amount of enemies, and then you could fire a grenade into each of the other ones, because they don't have to all be at the same corridors. We then have the auto loader belt, which is armor, so you can only use it when you have some health, and it takes up that armor slot. But you can essentially treat ammo that is on this card as though it was on any of your weapons. So you have 2 ammo slots here, and those 2 ammo slots are essentially like not magically, connected to all the weapons you have, and therefore you can just spend ammo from this instead. Quite useful if you're worried about running out of ammo. Now, this is a weapon where you don't have to worry about running out of ammo as much. That's next. It's the drum mag rifle. Doesn't have any special rules, but it does have 3 magazine slots, which means it's going to come with a lot of ammo, and it can hold a lot of ammo. So you don't have to reload very often with this thing, although you do eventually if you're shooting a lot. Now, we have the noise scanner, and this one will discard a noise from a corridor in the facility, but then you have to roll the noise die. If the result is the same as that corridor's noise value, you draw an intruder token from the bag, and you place it in that corridor. So this one's a little weird because in some cases you're actually causing more issues by doing it. However, it does potentially allow you to discard noise so long as you don't roll the same value on that die, because it's not actually a noise roll, you're just rolling the noise die. So basically, it's a way to potentially get rid of noise, but it's not a guarantee. And honestly, I don't think it's worth it because it does still cost you an action to do. But if you like this kind of thing, go for it. Next up is the plasma gun, another infinite ammo weapon. So it shoots and bursts normally. However, when rolling the low ammo symbol or the hazard symbol, you'll lose 2 health for every universal marker on it, and then you place a universal marker on it. So basically, it overheats sometimes. So for a little demonstration here, because this one's a little different, if it rolls those the first time, nothing's going to actually happen because there's no universal markers on it, so you won't lose any health. But then you'll place one on it. And if it happens again, now there'll be 1 on it, so you'll take 2 damage. And then you'll place another one. Now, it's getting more and more risky because now, if I were to roll one of those symbols, it's going to deal 4 damage, which is like half the health of a player. So, though this is a really good item, if you use it too much, it's possible it can be a danger. Now, I wouldn't worry about actually running into that issue right away. I'd say use as much as you want. It doesn't use ammo. But once you get that token on there the first time, start considering if it's worth potentially losing that health from firing it. Then we have the tactical armor. So this is another armor card that also has a medkit slot. And whenever you lose health as a result of an intruder attack, you lose 1 less. So if you just get a little scratch and it only does 1 damage, you're taking no damage. If you're losing 3 health, you'll lose 1 less, so you'll lose 2. This won't apply to serious injuries because serious injuries are, serious wounds, because serious wounds are not actually damage. They're just being placed on your board, and if they're placed in a spot where your health already was, your health goes down to below that, so it will only apply to normal damage. But it's still useful. And also, once again, only from intruder attacks. If a player blows something up in your room, it's not reducing damage. Same goes for fire. Fire damage is not being reduced. And then we have a really simple one, the utility vest. This is also armor, and it actually has 2 white slots here. So what that is essentially blank tactical belt slots. So at the start of the game, you'll basically have 2 of any of the tactical tokens in here, and then later in the game, you can put any ones in there as well. So it doesn't do anything special with them, but it does hold more. So not a bad item. Next up is the entrenching tool, another heavy item that can destroy an accessible door or place 2 secure tokens. So being that this is an infinite use item for 1 action, that's pretty good, because it's essentially a demolition at any time without actually consuming any specific card, or just a secure, but it's a better secure. So it would be like playing the secure card or the demolition card, but you don't have to actively have those specific cards. And then we have the Gatling gun. So it's 2 ammo, and when bursting, you can actually burst a second time at the same corridor without spending ammo. However, when rolling the burst die, the hazard symbol will break it, so it jams really easily, essentially. But being that it's essentially getting a double burst roll for the same amount of ammo, it's a really good item. But once again, you want to make sure you'll be able to repair it, so if you take it. Don't be someone that has no ability to repair. Next is a fun little pistol thing, the hand cannon. So it's a 1 ammo, and it has -1 to burst, so being that it's kind of like a pistol thing, it's not going to be all that effective at shooting a bunch of times into a corridor. But it has -1 to shoot, which, just to be clear here, that's actually a positive thing, because when you're rolling the shoot die, you want low numbers since you want to roll equal to or below the amount of damage you've dealt. So essentially, it's slightly more likely to actually kill an enemy when shooting at them, but less likely to kill enemies in corridors. We then have the security system control. which is a heavy item, infinite uses therefore, that allows you to discard a secure token from any room in your section, to choose a corridor adjacent to that room, roll a burst die and deal hits equal to the result in the chosen corridor, and then if you roll the hazard symbol, it breaks. So essentially, if you have a room that's already secured anyway, you can basically get free burst rolls without having to worry about ammo being spent, so long as you're not afraid of letting this break and therefore having to fix it to use it again. And we are down to 2 more items. So first we have the Biohazard Armor, which is another armor card at the medkit slot. And whenever you gain a contamination, you can instead lose 1 health, which isn't always worth it, but it's nice to have that option because if you would rather have your actions available, like for example, the last game I played, I was playing medical support and I had this item, and I didn't actually end up getting any contaminations anyway, but if I would have, it would have been very worthwhile for me to lose that health instead, because I can easily heal myself with that character. So it's up to you, but this can be definitely rather useful. And finally, the Tactical Hatchet, essentially the get out of jail free card, because this is a technically infinite use melee weapon, but as a melee attack, you deal critical damage instead of rolling the shoot die, and you break it. So it basically guarantees that you kill the enemy, which means you can just leave the room, essentially for free. I mean, you still have to deal with the melee attack part, but it does one-shot anything, and it will break itself when you do that, so you'll have to fix it before you can use it again. But it's nice if you end up finding yourself in a room with a really strong enemy when you don't have the health to take an attack. And one little bonus thing before the end of this video, I'm actually going to also go through all the serious wounds before we end, because I keep mentioning them and I don't see any better place to put them, since they are small cards. So there are 9 serious wounds and there are 3 copies of each, so they are all equally likely to receive when you would take a serious wound. So first, we have the leg injury, and also I'll pull up the little board just to demonstrate this. When you gain a serious wound, you place it under the farthest left section of your health track, and then if I was, for example, right here on the health track before I got that wound, I'm now going to drop down to the next spot after that serious wound. Quickest way to describe how those work. Okay, so the leg wound causes your make a move action, which is just to discard a card to move, from a room with an enemy to cost essentially an additional card. So it'll cost you 2 cards to run away from enemies directly. Then we have the body injury, which makes it so that when you draw cards during the drawing action step, you actually draw until you have 4 instead of drawing up to 5. So you'll have 1 less action card each turn. None of these are good, by the way. And then you have guts, so whenever you pass, we have clarification on passing from the last video with the sentry's ability. But basically, once during each round, so essentially at the end of your player phase of the round, you're going to gain a contamination. Then we have lungs, so whenever you pass, you lose an oxygen, but if you're already at 0, you lose 2 health instead. So rather than just causing you to start suffocating when you get to 0, you're actually just going to suffocate faster. But this is just letting you lose more oxygen more quickly. Although I will say this is probably one of the less horrible ones, just because losing 1 oxygen every round is not all that bad, as to the one you're already losing every turn in some cases. So next up is bleeding, which whenever you pass, you lose a health. Also, not great, but not horrible. It's once per round. Likely you're not going to be bleeding for all that long, whether it's because you die or the game ends in some other way, or just you manage to heal it. So therefore, it probably won't do all that much damage to you. It's more that you've already taken damage to get it, in most cases. So then we have the eyes, which add 1 to all your shoot results. That sounds good at first, but remember you want to roll low on shoot rolls, because this does not apply to burst. because shooting is based on like accuracy, whereas burst is based on sheer number of attacks. So either way, that makes it harder to shoot when you only have one eye. So then we have the hand injury, which makes it so your use item actions cost one more. Just for clarification, that is not the same as using an item to shoot or burst. It's specifically for using like utility items or any, well, and I should also clarify, tactical belt tokens are a separate action. So if you have the item card of a tactical belt token, that will cost you an extra action, but using the tactical belt tokens themselves do not. Last two, we have the knee injury. So moving cautiously will cost you one more, which is really annoying because that actually brings that cost up to 3 actions to move cautiously. Essentially, if you get this, just don't move cautiously at that point. You just need to get some healing and hope for the best. And then arm, which is also a really bad one, makes it so you only have one hand slot, and if you have items in both hands when you get this, you have to discard one of them, which can be really annoying, especially with those support equipment items, because those are really good, and you don't necessarily want to discard your primary weapon for that, but you have to if you have this kind of situation happen. So I'd say arm is probably one of the worst. But anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.